when we do our little review today of last week. So let us go ahead and start with prayer. Thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for this wonderful class, this wonderful group of students, dear Lord. Help them to remain encouraged in your word. Help them to continue on and focus on the task that's at hand, dear Lord. Help us to learn from one another and to continue to learn more about your word. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, last week we talked about intertextuality. Big fancy word. This is today's handout. Thank you. So we're just going to review last week. What I've done here is I went ahead and put the definitions down, and we'll just go over them really quickly. Okay, intertextuality, okay, is sometimes used merely to refer to the procedure by which later biblical text refers to an earlier text, how that earlier text enhances the meaning of the later one, and how the later one creatively develops the earlier meaning. So we said that there's three ways in which this is done. One of them is direct quotations, and last week we talked about how direct quotations are usually prompted by "as it is written," or "this is the way it says it, Jesus said it," so on and so forth. And so I gave some examples of direct quotations. And the first one that came to mind last week, we talked about Jesus' quotes from the Old Testament when he was in the wilderness, tempted by the devil. And he quoted right from Deuteronomy. So in Matthew 4:4, when talked about turning the rock to bread, Jesus says, but he answered, "It is written." Look on there. "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone, but by the word that comes out from the mouth of God." And the place where that comes from is Deuteronomy 8:3. And the second one was the one where the devil says, well, he takes him to this pinnacle of the temple, and he says, "Jump, and don't worry about it because the angels will catch you." And Jesus basically is telling him not to tempt God. So he says, "As it is written." There it is again. They're going to tell you, it's a direct quote. "You shall not put the Lord your God to the test." Okay, and then the last one is the last temptation. Jesus says, "Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve." And that's when he takes him to a really high place and says, "Hey, this is the kingdom, and you can have all of it." Can you imagine? Can you imagine telling God himself that I'm going to give you all this? It's already his. That always reminds me of tithing, because people think it's their money, but it's really God's money already. So what are you trying to say? Anyway, that was just a little opinion there. Okay, so those were examples that we gave last week for direct quotations. And then we had allusions. And allusions are a little bit different in that they're not prompted by "as it is written," and they're not like almost word for word of what is said in the Old Testament, but it's more of a unconscious way or that the author has you kind of turn to a certain subject. And so the definition is a brief expression consciously intended by the author to be dependent on the Old Testament passages, in contrast to the quotation of the Old Testament, which is a direct reference. Okay, so I gave you some examples in class last week. One of them was the cup, and we were looking at Mark, a section in Mark where Jesus is telling the apostles, the disciples, I'm going to be delivered unto. I'm going to basically die, and then after that, there's kind of like a change of subject, and the disciples, James and John, the sons of thunder, are asking Jesus, "Can we make a request of you?" And he says, "Well, what are you requesting?" He says, "Can we be to your left and to your right?" in the kingdom of heaven. And so God kind of says, Jesus says, well, to the left or to the right, that's not for me to decide. But if you're willing to drink of the cup I drink, okay. So I gave you some examples of where that is in the Bible. There's several places. Psalm 75:8 speaks of a cup in the Lord's hand. Psalms 11:6 is the cup that contains God's cursing. Okay, in there, the cup, when you're talking about, it's about cursing. There's other places in the Bible that it actually contains God's blessing, and that's like Psalm 16:5. Okay, so basically anytime that they talk about the cup in the Mediterranean, usually the head of the household would come with a cup and give it to the rest of the people around the table. And so it's supposed to be your lot in life, what is given to you, with the curses of blessings. In this case that we're talking about here is the cup that Jesus is going to receive when he takes on all the transgressions. So in that sense, it's a cup of curses in that he's going to take on all the transgressions and all the sin of the world. But in another sense, if you think about it, it's a blessing, because without that, without drinking, Jesus drinking from that, we wouldn't have the cup of blessings, which is our salvation. And so, let me see if I put that. Jesus prayed, and also, if you look at Matthew 26 through 46, it says that Jesus prayed on 3 different occasions during the night about the cup he was to drink. Oh, my Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as thou wilt. And he wasn't really saying, I don't want to do this. He's really saying this has to happen for your will to be, to come to pass. Another example that we gave last week was the flood. And for this one, I gave some examples. One there that is in Psalms 29:10, the flood. It says that the Lord sits enthroned over the flood. The Lord sits enthroned as a king forever. Okay? So the Lord enthroned, if you go back to that verse 9 of Psalms 29, is the place where God is enthroned. Okay? And then it is a place of power. The word for flood here comes from, it's supposed to bring you to the story of Noah in Genesis 6:17. And it shows the power of God. Okay? It makes a distinction between the faithful and the unfaithful. So, I had given other examples too, like if you hear the prodigal son, your mind automatically goes to that story. Allusions basically is not intentionally, the author will kind of weave something into the text, and it brings your mind to that story or that place or that time. So saying the flood, it brings you to Noah. Saying the cup, depending if he's talking about a curse or a blessing, it'll bring you to one or the other. Echoes are more of a subtle type of emphasis. And so that's on the next page. And I know I'm going through it rather quickly, but we did go over this last week. And this sheet that I'm giving you here, I've taken I've gone ahead and taken all of those and put them in the class outline. If you go in there and you got your different weeks, every sort of additional paper that I've given you, a resource, I've gone ahead and put those in there. So you'll find your chronology for the Bible. You'll find your context, the various contexts of the Bible in there. Basically, every piece of paper that I've handed to you, I've put in there. The categories of the Bible, like the genre, I've put in there as well. So if you've lost them or something, just know that they're in there for you to study from. Okay, so echoes. The echo is merely a subtle reference to the Old Testament that is not as clear as the allusion. And I've looked at different books, and sometimes an allusion illusion and an echo is kind of like used interchangeably. So I'm not really quite sure exactly if there's really that big of a difference. But here's some of the examples that I found, and the references for these examples are down below the books that I got them from. Ezekiel's condemnation of the king of Tyre, okay, echoes the fall story in Genesis. And this and what it does is it says in there, when you read it, it says, "You were in Eden, the garden of God. Every precious stone was your covering. On the day that you were created, they were prepared. With an anointed cherub as guardian, I placed you. You were on the holy mountain of God. You walked among the stones of fire. You were blameless in your ways from the day that you were created until iniquity was found in you." Kind of echoing or sounding kind of like the fall of man, but not the fallen condition of man in the garden when they fell. So that's what it's supposed to kind of echo. Okay. So then the second example, and we didn't do this last week, but I just put some more examples for you. Mark 13:24-26. It said, "But in those days, after the suffering, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light, and the stars will be falling from heaven, and the powers in heaven will be shaken. Then they will see the Son of Man coming in the clouds with great power and glory. They will send the angels and gather his elect from the four winds of the ends of the earth to the ends of heaven." Okay, so this is kind of like the apocalyptic style type of literature that we've talked about before. It has typically a lot of symbols. And in this way, the various things that they talk about here come from different verses. That's why I like this one, because it echoes different verses. The reference of the sun and the moon is kind of drawings, or that's an echo to Isaiah 13:10 and Joel 2:10. The stars falling from heaven echoes Isaiah 34:4. While gathering of the elect suggests Zechariah 2:6. But most of the attention has focused on the reference to the Son of Man in the clouds. So those are just some examples. What is good and maybe good that you do with this information is if you have something like that in the passage that you selected, you could say, hey, the author alluded to, or this is an allusion, or this is a direct quote. So this is how this... Another way that you can find allusions too, if you cross-reference. If you have a verse and you go through the cross-reference and it sends you back to another, it say, hey, it's alluding to that verse. Okay? All right. So this concludes our review from last week on intertextuality. I hope that you guys all have it down. And today, we're going to continue on the literary context. And there's no marker here. Oh, yeah. And today, for your viewing pleasure, we're going to do a word study. And what we're going to try to decipher or evaluate is Saul, anointed king, did anybody notice? I put a question mark. And that will become clear to you. And David, anointed king. Okay. And to start this study, I just want to say that in 1 Samuel chapter 8, And we could go there and look, but I'll just tell you about it. In 1 Samuel chapter 8, the people of Israel come to Samuel and say, you're getting old, and your sons are not really, after the Lord's heart. They're really not doing what they're supposed to be doing. And we need to have, some kind of somebody who's able to judge and lead the people. What we want is a king. We want to have a king like all the other nations have. We want us a king. And so, Samuel was, very upset, because, he felt that, the whole time it was actually the Lord who was leading through him as the prophet. And God basically said, Samuel, don't be disappointed because they have not rejected you, but they have rejected me. So just tell them what is going to happen when they have a king. And some of the things that happen when a king comes into power is that all of a sudden the tax is taken, right? They have to have so much of whatever their herds are, because they have to, pay for basically what the king does, right? And they take their sons usually to battle. So what is it that you're doing? You're going to become slaves to this king. And so there's a section in there where Samuel gives them warnings of what it is, what exactly is going to happen when God gives you the king that you're so wanting. Okay, so then I like us to go to 1 Samuel chapter 9, and I'll read from there. So now there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, the son of Abiel, the son of Zerah, the son of Bechorath, the son of Appiah, a Benjamite, a mighty man of power. And he had a son whose name was Saul, a choice young man, a goodly, and there was not among the children of Israel, this is King James Bible, a goodlier, not godlier, goodlier. I think some of your versions say handsome person than he. From his shoulders and upward, he was higher than any of the people. Okay, and then it says that donkeys of Kish, Saul's father, were lost. And Kish said to Saul, his son, take now one of the servants and go look for these donkeys. Okay, and so he goes to look for the donkeys. So I'm going to tell you what happens in between. So Saul and his servant go look for the donkeys, and they can't find them. And just when they're thinking, okay, maybe it's time to return because, now my father's going to be worried about me, the servant says to Saul, hey, wait a second. I know that in this town here, there's a man from God. And he's talking about Samuel. Let's go and seek advice from him about, where the donkeys are. So then we go to 10. Then Saul said to his friends, well, come, let's go. So they went up to the city and where the man of God was. And they went up to the hill to the city, and they found young maidens drawing water, and said unto them, is there a seer here? And a seer is what a man from God used to be called. And they told him yes. And to make a long story short, they go and seek his help. And let's drop down to 1 Samuel 9:17. And when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord said unto him, behold, the man whom I spoke of you, to thee, of this same shall reign over my people. So he's saying, the man that I talked to you about, he's the one that's going to reign the people. Then Saul drew near to Samuel in the gate and said, tell me, I pray thee, where is the seer's house? Okay, to make a long story short, Samuel was going to the temple because they were going to do an offering. So he says, just come with me. He goes, he sets Saul down, okay, and there's this big feast. He had already saved some food for him because the Lord had said the day before that he was coming and to save him some food, so he did. And And then here's the thing. When you go to Samuel 9:16. I'm sorry. Well, let's go back to 9:15. It says, now the Lord had told Samuel in his ear a day before Saul came, saying, so this is whose words? God's words. Tomorrow, about this time, I will send thee a man out of the land of Benjamin, and thou shalt anoint him to be what? What does your translation say? Yours says captain, yours says prince. What does yours say? What does yours say? Yes. Okay, this is why it's good to do word studies, because the people ask for a king. So I'm putting the information out for you. In the information that I gave you, go to the one that's like this, and it says verse 9:16. Take a look at that. We'll look at it together. And one of the tools that for me has been really good to look at, okay, is the Blue Letter Bible, because it has a lot of tools together, and you can just go onto their website and get them. And if you look on the top there's an interlinear. There's different Bibles. There's cross references. There's commentaries, and there's dictionaries. Okay. Up on the top. But if you look, this is a reverse interlinear, and what it is you can see on the top, it's got the 9:16, and that's in Hebrew, okay, and at the bottom it's got the Greek, okay. When you look at the columns over here, you'll have it in English, and then it's got the Strong's number, or what they call the lexicon number, okay, and then it gives you the words in Hebrew. Okay, so if you go down to, and shall anoint him to be prince, okay, you'll find that the word that they're using is the Hebrew lexicon number, or Strong's number 5057. And what you see there is a transliteration, Nagid, okay? N-A. So when the Lord is speaking, I guess my point is that when the Lord is speaking, he's saying, go anoint a king. A lot of, we say that, King Saul was the first king of Israel. But when God is speaking, he's saying, go anoint yourself a prince, a commander, or a captain. If you go to the next page, all I did was, just so when you're doing your studies, if you do a word study in your paper, you would go to that number. If you're in the Blue Letter Bible, you would go to that number, and this is all highlighted in blue. So when you press, it links you up to that. And that would be what's on the next page. Okay? And so the transliteration simply means this is what it sounds like in English, okay? Nagid, okay? Naged pronunciation, okay? So when you look at the what it means, okay, Strong's definition, it says a commander, civil, military, or religious, generally honorable themes, captain, chief, excellent thing, governor, leader, noble prince. Does it say king anywhere in there? No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. And we're talking about Saul being anointed to lead the people. Yes. Okay. And there was three things, I'm trying to find the verse, that God wanted to anoint him for. Okay, and there they are. It's the same verse, 1 Samuel 9:16. There was three things. He says, thou shalt anoint him to be captain over my people, that he may save the people from the Philistines. For I have looked upon my people because their cry has come unto me. It was, let me see if I can find it here. Okay. So there was three things that God wanted to anoint Saul for. And number 17, no, it's still in 16. Anoint him to be prince over the people. He shall save my people from the Philistine. And then it says, for I have seen my people because their cry has come. And then 17, it says, when Samuel saw Saul, the Lord told him, here is a man of whom I spoke to you. He shall restrain my people, not reign over my people, restrain. And that is important. I would have done also, I'm working on a paper now for my master's class. I would have done a word study on the restrain also, because it means reign, but it also means restrain. And if you go back to other places where the word restrain is used, it's actually talking about restraining the people of God from going to idols. You know, keeping them close to God, ever present with God. You know, this is a time where all the tribes were kind of scattered. There wasn't like one unifying person. It was just Samuel and his sons, which were not following the Lord's commandments or anything. Okay, so it's very important that if you're going to do a word study, that you kind of go back to the original language and find out exactly what it is that they're saying. Okay? If we move on, let's see. Restrain. So, no, this here means captain, commander, or prince. It does not mean king. So when Samuel was saying, when the Lord was saying to Samuel, go anoint yourself a leader, he never called it a king. He called it a commander, a captain, or a prince, not a king.
So maybe he was just appointed to lead them in battle.
And yes.
And to be a leader to a certain capacity, not to. So how what happened?
The commanders, okay, there were commanders of 1,000, commanders of 100, and commanders of 50. And so this would be like the commander of the commanders, the chief officer.
Military.
Okay, yeah. And it's not just military. They had commanders of the temple. And what they did is they were the head of they were like the superintendents over the guards over the temple. So it's just a title that was given. Okay. I also wanted you to go ahead and take a look at Samuel 10:1. Then Samuel took a vial of oil and poured it upon his head, talking about Saul, and kissed him and said, he said, not because the Lord hath anointed thee to be, again, the word used there is captain. Captain over his inheritance, not king. It's the same word used in that verse. And now, let's go to Samuel Why did I put a question?
No, not you.
It's just the way it's written. If you look at other translations, I was just reading the King James. How you too? Yeah.
That's in a question form.
No, it's a not like. Yeah. You know, if you don't know, Hebrew is written from right to left, not from left to right. And that's a good thing for you guys to look at as well. If you look back at the if you look back, okay, this one's got it that way. But when you looking down at the words, it's not the same order as up here. You know, they're symbols. The Hebrew language is more like symbols. It's a language where a symbol not only has a picture, but it has a meaning, and it means a concept of things. Okay, so. And down there is the Greek.